Leadership, where we spotlight amazing leaders from all walks of life and industries who share their experiences and best tips with you, our listeners. Welcome, I'm your host, Beth Johnson, and I'm here today with my guest, Jon Fair, and his friend, Stacy. I've known Jon now for 25 years. We met as neighbors in Arizona when he was still working for the man. That changed, though, when 23 years ago he opened and still owns today Fair Refrigeration based in Gilbert, Arizona. He's also husband to, in his words, beautiful Becca, who puts up with him, and is dad to two amazing daughters, Kendra and Mallory. Mallory. I always mess that up. I apologize.
It's not Mallory. It's Mallory. Mal means bad. That's why.
Oh, very good. That's good distinguishment. Sorry, Mel. So welcome, Jon. It is so great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. To kick us off, tell me about being a commercial refrigeration contractor and what drew you to that profession.
Well, I was running restaurants when I was younger after I got out of college, and I still didn't know what to do with my life. So I always liked to work with my hands, and I thought to myself, I was always a mechanical person. Well, why not go back to school again? And I went back to school at a place called Universal Technical Institute down in Phoenix, Arizona. And it turned out to be get a 2-year degree. I didn't even know I was getting a degree. And basically, then I got to work with my hands for a living. I thought, great, now I'm responsible for myself. I'm not responsible for running whole restaurants anymore like I used to. And it just went from there. I was young. I was like 25 years old when this started. But I'd already been through undergraduate. So, I mean, to be honest, I got through with undergraduate school. I went through a year of graduate school. And I still didn't know what I want to do with my life. And that's what I keep telling kids nowadays. I'm like, you not knowing what you want to do when you're 22 years old, don't freak out. I didn't figure out what I wanted to do until I was in my mid-20s. I still wasn't even sure I was doing the right thing until I was in my trade for 3 years.
That's awesome advice, actually, because I think Stacy, myself, would probably all agree. None of us knew exactly what we wanted to do at 19 or 20.
No.
How does it compare to the restaurant business, what you're doing now?
Oh, you see, that's why I got into commercial refrigeration. Because what I do is I'm the guy that goes, my company, we work bars, hotels, restaurants. You go into a Subway sub shop. You go into pizzeria. You go to a Hilton hotel. I'm the guy that fixes the ice machines on the floors. We fix the walk-in coolers. Every time you get a drink or a Coke in a bar, I'm the guy that fixes your ice machines. We're a manufacturer, authorized service for all 4 of the major ice machine manufacturers. We work for everybody. I mean, if you pay us, we go. If you stop paying us, we will never work for you again.
Is that written on your truck?
It's that easy. I mean, we provide a service and we do the best that we can. We do it well. And that's the thing. It's just do your job. Be good at what you do. If you're going to be a ditch digger, just be a good one. That's it.
And I know this about Jon. As I said, I've known him for years. And you don't keep a business in business for 23 years and have people still clamoring to get to you if you're not running it well, doing the job well, and being ethical in the work that you do. So, well, how did you start your company, and what challenges or roadblocks did you face as you one, decided you were going to go out on your own, and two, open the business?
Well, when I got out of technical school, look, when you go to a trade school or you go to college, when you get out, you don't hit the ground running. You know enough to be dangerous and break stuff. You know, your first job, getting your foot in the door of that first job, your job is to absorb. They're not going to pay you that much. Because remember, they have to sink a ton of cash in you. If you think I've got this fancy degree or I've got this experience, you don't know anything. You're too foolish to know what you don't know yet. That's the best way I can put it. But then you just have to put in the time. And you have to be a sponge. Remember, your first job, this is when you're learning that industry. And anything they'll give you, you take it. They say they'll let you go to classes in the evening. Hey, we'll pay for your class, but you're doing it on your own time. Take it. Once you get that knowledge in your brain, when you eventually leave, they can't take it away from you. It's yours. So a lot of times, initially, your first jobs, you're going to be underpaid. And yeah, it's irritating, but it happened to our parents, our grandparents. I mean, your job when you're young is to absorb because you can do 12 hours a day standing on your head and still go out to the lake with your friends on the weekend. You can work on 4 hours of sleep. You don't want to start doing that when you're 50 or 60 because your body just doesn't do that anymore. So I got to a point with when I got my first job. I mean, he paid me next to nothing, but I knew next to nothing. And I mean, he invested time and money in me. He asked me when he first interviewed me, the question they always ask you when you go into an interview, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I looked at him and smiled. And remember, I wasn't, a high school kid. I wasn't, 19 years old. I was 25 years old. And I looked at him, I said, in 5 years, I said, I'll be competing against you. And I remember my old boss, who then was probably in his mid-40s, looked at me and smiled. And he didn't disrespect me. He looked at me and smiled and shook his head and gave me this weird little quirky smile. And that was it. I was offered the job. I worked for him for 5 years. And I worked and I learned as much as I could as fast as I could. Because I knew that the more that I knew, the more money I made him, the more money I would get paid. And then I reached a point where I actually topped the scale out in my trade in the Phoenix market. Because every market will have a different, in California you make twice as much as you do, in Mississippi to live the same lifestyle. But in the Phoenix market, I topped out my hourly wage. So the only way I was going to get further ahead was to either put in more overtime, which I didn't have a wife and kids back then, so it didn't matter. So, I mean, I was willing to put in the time. I was always kind of a little bit of a workaholic. But then I got to a point where, what did I have to lose by if my business failed? What did I have to lose? Go back to work for somebody for top wage? There was no downside to it, I guess. I mean, I put myself in a position where even if I failed, what's the worst thing to do? Go back to doing what I'm doing right now, which is, when I was, being a mechanic, just a mechanic. And then I also looked at other people. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. If this was rocket science, I couldn't do it. My motto has always been, you never have to be the smartest guy. You just got to be smarter than the guy next to you. And you want to know what? That's not always true. Because a lot of times the smarter guy that's next to you is unmotivated. You may be 3/4 as smart as him and may not catch on quite as quickly. But if you're willing to put in the effort, I mean, if he wants to work 40, great, you work 45. You pay attention to the details. Let him have all his time at the bowling alley every Friday night. If your boss wants you to work a little late, put in a little bit extra time. Remember, you're going to be learning things off the clock that are going to put you years ahead. But you still have to, when you're young, put in the time. It doesn't happen overnight. Oh, I've been in this trade for 9 months. So what? It takes 3 years for me to build a guy to make him worth anything at all. I mean, a lot of it is time, and people don't understand it now. They want instant gratification. That's not how it works. Not the real world. Not the world I live in.
Really, really wise words. And what I'm picking up from that is an emphasis on work ethic, on being motivated. How or where, or who taught you your work ethic, and where did your motivation, where was it derived from?
I'm from the Midwest originally, and so when I was a kid, I come from a good family. I did get an allowance when I was a little kid, but still, when it snowed, I shoveled driveways. I mowed lawns in the summertime. When I was old enough to get my first job, I lied about my age and made myself when I was 15 because I wanted to work. I was in high school, but I wanted to work, and they wouldn't hire anyone under 16. So I actually lied. This is back in the day where you could kind of get away with that for a little bit because the computers, it wasn't like right now, the checking I-9s and all that stuff. And I got hired at this place called Brown's Chicken in Chicago. It's a local Chicago chain. And I don't know. I watched my dad work. And then I always wanted to make sure I had enough money to put gas in the car. My parents were always good about not just giving me everything. When I got my first car, my dad, it was an old station wagon. My parents were getting ready to trade it in. My dad said, Jonathan, it was a station wagon. You're in high school. Kids are driving cool Cutlasses and GTOs and stuff. And I'm looking at a 78 Olds Cutlass Cruiser wagon. And my dad said, hey, they're willing to give us, was it $2,300 in trade-in. Cars cost a lot less back then. I'll tell you what, I'll sell it to you for half the trade value. I'll match you dollar for dollar. And that was the first thing. So even though I didn't pay full price, but I knew I had to change the oil in the car, I had some skin in the game. And you have to have skin in the game. That was part of it. I watched how my dad worked. I never wanted to beg for money. And a lot of motivation came from we didn't have crazy video games where you wasted all your time. My motivation at that age, being a 15-year-old, 16-year-old boy, was girls. I don't know what else to say. I mean, you wanted to have a car so you could take a girl for a date. You wanted to have money so you could take her to the movies, so you could take her to Taco Bell at midnight. Well, not midnight, because of course she had to be home by then. And if you push that, next time it'd be 11. Or her dad would like to see you again.
Yeah.
See, it was things are. I mean, yeah, things are different now, but they're also the same. I think that's where I got my work ethic from, just because I wanted freedom. And even having an old Cutlass Cruiser wagon was freedom. I mean, kids think they have freedom with Uber and stuff now. No, they don't. I can get my car right now. I can tell Beth, see you later, and just get in my car and drive away.
And not
I don't
have to
wait
on
for anybody.
Yep.
If I want to go get Taco Bell, well, there's not one here, but I can go get in the car and go drive Taco Bell and I figure out, Mom, can you take me? Or I mean, how do you get a date when you're 18 or 20 years old living in your parents' basement? When I was that age, girls wouldn't even look twice at you. You had to be self-motivated. You want to make yourself attracted to the opposite sex, or if you're gay, a partner. It doesn't matter to me. But I mean, that was part of the motivation. That was really my sole motivation.
It's actually a very good philosophy to apply to the kids today, to the new or the now generation, because it's not necessarily that they're looking for partners, but what is their impetus? What is their freedom? Right? You were looking for freedom. What is it that you, our listeners, might be looking for today? And then you're saying place the focus on that and go about getting it for yourself. Now, that may look a little different today because of the workplace, but that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, you can't force someone to be motivated. The only way, but just remember that it's called freedom. I mean, you having a driver's license, kids who don't want to get their driver's license right at 16 years old, they still want their mom and dad to drive them around when they're 17, 18 years old, or wait for your friend to pick you up. What are you afraid of?
Well, and that's a good point, right? Because it also, and I'm a business coach and a life coach, is if there is a fear, identify it, figure it out. What is holding you back from what you want? Because the truth is, nobody in the world will do it, define it for you. You will make your own way in the world, and you have the right and the ability to set the path to get there.
And you're going to make mistakes.
Yep.
I've been in business for 23 years. I've been doing my trade for 28 years now. And I've been training guys in my trade for a long time. And I'm good at what I do, but I am not the best. I mean, there are guys out there that are better than me. I know there are. And the minute you think you're the best, you're done. There's an arrogance there. You should never be arrogant. Like I said, there's a difference between being confident and being arrogant. And I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm not the best. But I will tell you.
Well, you were mentioning making mistakes, right? You're always going to make mistakes.
Well, when I train these guys, and they say, John, are you ever sick of being right? It's kind of a joke. Some of the guys at the company, I'll talk to them on the phone because I do technical support for when we go out to fix something, someone's stuck on something, I'm asking them questions over the phone and talking to them. And I'll say, this is what you have going on. I know it. I've seen it before. Or when I say to a guy, be careful, don't, blah, blah, blah. Trust me, I've done it. I got to be as good as I am right now because I've spent 28 years making mistakes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you're going to make mistakes when you're young. You're expected to. But I mean, how do you get better if you don't make mistakes?
Exactly. And I was just actually coaching someone this week where I said the same. When we learn to embrace our mistakes and take joy in them and rejoice in them, we are going to grow so much faster because in every mistake, there's a lesson to be learned. Maybe you turned the wrong nut somewhere on a piece of machinery and the equipment died. I obviously I'm not the mechanic here. But you'll know not to do that next time, and you'll be wary of all the other nuts and bolts on machinery and the damage they can do. So you not only learn something with a mistake, but your knowledge can grow exponentially.
No, when you're foolish is when you make a mistake and you don't take anything away from it.
Exactly.
And the other thing that I see also is when I was younger, I was kind of, I'll be honest, I was a kid where I wouldn't believe it. Someone who was older than me said, hey kid, don't touch the stove, it's hot. I would still go over to put my hand on the stove like an idiot.
Isn't that all boys?
Well, I mean, but I learned as I got older, listen to that voice.
Yeah.
And, when someone who's older than you that obviously has more experience says, be careful because I've seen this happen. take their word for it. I mean, if it's someone you trust, don't touch a hot stove after someone you trust says it's hot, don't touch it. I know that sounds dumb, but I see it all the time.
Well, that's why we've got you here. I mean, you've been in business for 23 years for a reason, right? Now, if you're willing, and you can pass on this, but what is the biggest mistake in your memory that you made that you wish you had never encountered in business?
In business.
Or if you got to really juice them personal, we can listen to that too.
Well, one of my philosophies is they're very, everyone always says no regrets, no regrets. Mm-hmm. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but if you like who you are when you get them, but all of the mistakes and all the experience I've had, whether they be good or bad, have made me who I am today. And so if you like yourself when you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror, and well, as a guy, when you look in the mirror and shaving, if you like that person, how can you complain? Because every mistake, whether it was a divorce, that when you got divorced when you were younger and it went south, well, what did you learn from that? How's that changed the way you look at yourself now, 20 years later? So would I go back and say, God, I wish I would have never met her. God, she broke my heart. No, you learn from that stuff, and next time, wow, I'll be smarter about it this time. Or, hey, don't ever say this when you walk in the door after being gone. That you learn from these things. But to me, the only regret that I really always comes to mind is I started smoking cigarettes when I was younger, and nothing good has ever come from smoking cigarettes. That's the one thing, because it was cool back then.
Except that sexy voice you got going on.
Well, you see, right now I should be able to sing karaoke. The only thing I can do is, hey, baby. I can't.
It's the Barry White baby.
Yeah, I can't even do that well. But yeah, are there things? Oh, and I've made mistakes, but nothing. I know contractors who burn houses down by accident.
Oh, wow.
Not me. They left an ember alone. They were welding something together in an attic, and I don't do residential work. But I mean, his life didn't end. But I'll tell you, I didn't have to learn that, because I remember my old boss saying to me, "Yeah, John, I burned someone's house down once." That's all he had to say to me. I didn't have to do it once to learn it myself. I'll take your word for it, Mike. I want to make sure you're up there with a fire extinguisher, and before you walk away, make sure it's out, no embers. You have water, whatever. That's just an example. But.
Two things you said there. One is, for our more seasoned leaders that are listening, it does behoove you and your team for you to share the things that you learn the hard way. Now, like John said, you're younger people, and I was the same way when I was a young leader. I felt I'm going to figure it out on my own, until one time I decided I better stop doing that, because it was more painful than listening to my superiors and what they had learned the hard way. Well, I forget the other thing. We'll come back to that. But it's so interesting. Everything you've just shared, for me, is leadership. But when I approached you about doing the podcast with me, you were a little unsure. You were a little surprised that I would seek you out as a leader. Can you tell me about that?
My first thought was, why? Because well, you're a leader. You own a company. But I don't see it that way. I just do a job. I called my wife earlier. I said, I think I'm going to be interviewed on a podcast. And she was questioning. She's like, what? For what? I said, leadership. And there was dead silence. like I thought I lost connection. And she said, why? I said, I guess because we own a company. And she said, huh. And that was it. I mean, that was the extent of the conversation. But the thing is I don't think of myself as a leader. I just go to work. I do a job. I provide a service. And I have guys that, you said, yes, they work for me because they're on a payroll. But I work with them. I'll never ask anybody that all the guys that work, the mechanics that work with me, and I'm still out in the field. I'm still a mechanic. And I struggle with people saying, oh, so you're the president, you're the CEO. No, I'm really the owner. Even though we're a corporation, I'm still the owner, because I guess I'm 100% shareholder of the corporation. But CEO sounds, what's the word I'm looking for? It sounds arrogant. President, it makes you like you're trying to make yourself more important than you are. I just, in leaders who are arrogant, no one wants to follow. There's nothing worse. I mean, would you want to work with someone that's not willing to get down there with you? And when you have a leader, and I'm not saying, man, boy, do I make mistakes, boy. Like when I talk to my guys, I get upset. I can yell and scream, but do I ever call my guys, what are you, stupid? God, no, never say stuff like that. But I can get upset and animated because I care. I mean, it's kind of like parents. If a parent doesn't say, you better be home by X amount, and they just let you run around all night, so wouldn't you rather have a parent that cared and said, don't be smoking cigarettes, I don't want you to see you with Sally, blah, 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 you're going to get in trouble? Would you ever have a parent just kicks the door up and runs free? Sounds fun when you're 15, but then you look back when you're 25 and go, wow, I wish they would have given me a little more direction.
Kids don't even realize it, that it's ingrained in them and they are built to look for parameters. And those are to be provided by their parents.
Well, employers are like that also.
Exactly.
It's very similar. I mean, and believe me, it's not like when I talk about the guys that I work with, it's not like they're my children, but I learn as much from some of these guys as they learn from me. I mean, and like I said, I'm the furthest thing from perfect when it comes to a leader. But they know when I look them and ask them to do something, I'll never ask them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Or they don't think that I'm lying to them to get them to do something. I'm not sitting on the back saying good job and then talking crap about them behind my back. You have to have some ethics. I mean, your word has to mean something, because if your word doesn't mean anything, who's going to follow somebody like that?
And who's going to call you for business, and eventually you'll be found out anyway.
And what happens? I mean, if you want to take a vacation for a week, my company's still running right now, and I know things are still going well. Why? Because these guys take care of me. So when I'm there, I make sure they get taken care of. And everybody, because I'm not a huge corporation, everyone has their own individual things that drive them. Some of them it's about money. Some of them it's about stability. And one of the things that I've learned as an employer is you learn after you get to know people, what are their motivators? I mean, obviously money's obviously a motivator for everybody. But there are some guys that'll jump ship for 50 cents an hour. And other guys you could quote unquote underpay $3 an hour from the going wage. And they're still happy as hell to be working with you still, because they know they're used to a routine. They know their place in the company. They know they can and can't get away with. The other thing though is I've always been very careful about is my guys, they never come to me saying they want more money. I pay attention to the guys that work for me. And sometimes they'll just get a raise without even knowing it. I don't even do an employee interview. All of a sudden there's another $1 an hour, and I'll get a call like 2 weeks later saying, hey John, I noticed my payroll gave me a raise. Thank you very much. I'm like, oh, you've been killing it, man. Keep on going. And the same thing that my old boss said to me, dude, the more money you make me, the more I pay you. And you take care of your people because they're the ones that take care of you.
I wonder if you understand how rare that is in the world today.
Maybe with larger companies, and that's the draw when I meet guys, because I have to compete against big contractors. Yeah. I mean, it's me and 5 other mechanics, and there's a couple ladies that run the office. And I don't mean that, just trust me. I'm like Dave Thomas from Wendy's. I'm like the face guy. Hi, I'm Jon Fair with Fair Refrigeration. You know who really runs the place? The women behind the scenes. I have a real wife, the one I have kids with, and then I have my work wife, Karen. And Karen tells me what to do. I have to check with her. I mean, I couldn't function without Karen and Michelle, the girls in my office. And I say the girls in my office, and it's not meant to be disrespectful. In some ways, trust me, you rather want women running your office because they're more detail-oriented. They can usually multitask better than men. Not always. These are generalizations. I know in today's world. I mean, if I got canceled, I wouldn't even know because I don't have presence. So.
Everything you've shared is so important for every leader, but especially those who are, new, young, or are up and coming and future leaders. The example being set today by especially your big corporate leadership, right? They are far removed from the people, even sometimes their mid-level management teams, and then go home at night wondering what the hell is happening to my company. and this is something you'll hear me talk a lot about on this podcast, is the human behind your employee, the human capital, if you will, of your company. Because I guarantee you, if you do not work to do what Jon has just talked about, and that is understand each individual versus put them all in one bucket and try one strategy with all and then bitch because it didn't work. It won't work. We're all individuals with individual drivers and individual motivations. And when an employer understands that, and you'll see this from studies, several studies with Forbes and other, high-ranking organizations, that an employee will stay, as Jon said, most of the time for less money if you just recognize who they are, talk with them like an adult, that you hired an adult for their skill set, and like a human. And does that apply to 100%? No. But in my experience, and it sounds like Jon and yours, it's effective.
There's a balance. I mean, yeah, there's a balance. But money is not a sole motivator. I mean, to some people it is. I mean, but generally the people where money is the sole motivator, frankly, I don't want to work with them.
They'll move on anyway.
It doesn't matter. But I mean, I can buy as many vans as I want. I can load them full of equipment. I can drop $50,000 buying a van, put them ladder racks. I can do that. That's the easy part of my job. The hardest part is the employees, is the people to do the work. Because you do get to a point where I'm a very good mechanic. I can probably pound for pound outwork every one of my guys, even though I've gotten older, just because I'm more efficient than I was, because now I think about everything before I do it, because I'm older. I have a back and a knee and my knees and whatever. But they have to understand they may stay for more money because of they're a human being and you recognize them as that. And every one of my guys knows how I feel about them, because I can't do what I do without them. I make that very clear to them all the time. Dude, you killed it. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do it without them.
Well,
and also you have to tell your people that.
Yes. Not just, a pat on the back, right? It literally comes in the form of communication, face-to-face, eye-to-eye, right? That says, you're valued. And in your own words, you're valued. I couldn't do this without you. Now, we're not talking about coddling employees either. We're not talking about, pat your back and tell you every day how valuable you are. You do earn part of that, but just for the fact that you show up, you're giving your all for your employer. When the employer comes back to you with that gratitude and that appreciation, it does mean a lot to a lot of people. And you touched on a word, is taking the time. And I found as a young leader watching my leaders who weren't doing what I kind of intuitively knew they should, it takes an enormous amount of time, we're not going to lie about it, in order to, one, get to know your people, two, get to know their skill set, get to know what their future aspirations are, outline what drives and motivates them, figure out how to apply that to that individual versus the whole other set of parameters for the next individual, multiply that by a team of 15. That is time consuming. But I guarantee you it pays off on the bottom line. It just does.
I couldn't agree more.
So, Jon, what's your governing philosophy? The one thing that you would say you lead your company and your team by?
There are two things. Under-promise, over-perform. I mean, really, think about that. Think about anything you see on TV nowadays. You buy some gadget that's supposed to do something, and it not only does it, but does it better than what they say, because we've all gotten so used to everyone saying, and it'll fold your clothes, and it does a quarter of it. And even if that's pretty cool, still you were expecting so much more, so you're disappointed. To me, I've always been fairly conservative as far as work goes, as far as I don't get big accounts and then figure out how am I going to get people to do the job. I get my guys and get my company to a place where all of a sudden now I can take on a huge account, like a Dunkin' Donuts, 70 new stores. I wouldn't take on the account until I found another mechanic, because I want to make sure if I promise this guy I can take care of your stuff, but that also goes in, I need to have the people to do it. But that also goes into reputation. Reputation is everything. I don't advertise at all. I used to back when there were the yellow pages. You know, everyone remembers now they don't even use them for kids to sit at the table anymore. It's terrible. Now you have to buy high chairs. But really? And but I don't even advertise anymore. Everything with my business is through word of mouth, and because I do so much work for manufacturers, I'm on all their websites. That's free advertising. I don't pay Google for anything. I don't pay anybody for any of this stuff. We just go out there, we do our job, and someone says, well, why don't you buy us another company and then you can get their customer accounts? Why would I do that? All I've got to do is get one phone call and we'll outwork them. That's it.
You actually answered my next question, which would be, what would be your best advice for a leader that struggles with that particular philosophy?
Man, I'll tell you, if you promise someone you're going to do something, just do it. To me, I started my business, everything's all about contracts and getting sued, and I don't care what the contract said. If I looked you in the eye and shook your hand and said, I'm going to bring it in at this price, man, if I blew the bid and it cost me $4,000, I will still make sure it's right. And damn, next time I do that, I'll remember, wow, this is the kind of S show that can happen. I got to put that into my bid. You'll take that into account later. But then you don't go back hand in hand to the customer saying, sorry, I'm going to have to charge you an extra $5,000. No, that's not how it works. I mean, if you promise someone to shake their hand, you do it. Period.
Amen.
I mean, when you fall over dead, you won't even be there. But you know how successful you were by the number of people who show up at your grave. And not
that
because
guy
they're
that
in your will.
Exactly. And that guy that you came back to and said, I need an extra $5,000 because I can't keep my word, isn't going to be there.
It's all about reputation. If you promise them, I will be there on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, you're there at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning unless you're in the hospital or dead. That's it.
So, what would your favorite or your most fun, like it sounds like you are in tune with your team, and it's your wife is involved and good friends are involved as well with your business. What do you do for fun?
That's something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
I don't have, I've got 2 kids, and and because of work, I haven't always been as involved as I should have been. I'm trying to be really careful not to be. My dad wasn't involved. My dad went out and made money. My mom was home with my brother and I. And my family kind of mimics that a little bit. But I try harder to make sure I don't miss recitals for band, and I still can't go to every soccer game and all this stuff when they had karate and all that. But my job is to be better at it than my dad was. But at the same time, I understand my responsibility is to make sure that I can pay for health insurance, that I can do this, and and it's not just me, and I know I'm getting off topic here, but one of the hardest things about owning a company is not only am I worried about my family, but all the guys that work for me have car payments, mortgage payments. After a while, you feel like you don't work for yourself. I work for everybody else. Mm-hmm. It's a tremendous amount of stress. It really is. But to me, if I really think about it, if I would just stayed working for somebody, I would not be. I've never met anyone who's gone into business for themselves and said, God, I wish I would just stay working for someone else.
Despite how stressful it was.
Pardon?
Despite how stressful it was.
Yeah, I mean, because it's different kinds of stress, but also the rewards are bigger. With risk comes reward. I mean, if you want to take zero risk, just keep going to work every day and punching the clock, and then go bowling on Friday night. Knock yourself out. The only time that I get irritated with people is when they complain about stuff, but won't even get up and go to work. That's a different topic altogether. But, not everyone's made to own their own company. Some people are. I never thought of myself as a self-starter, ever. But I guess I am when I wake up in the morning and go, and I always feel like, God, I should be doing something instead of just lying in bed, even though I'll find something I have to do. I don't know. Maybe it turns into kind of a disease. I don't know. But as far as what I do with my off time, I tinker in the garage, work on old cars, old trucks.
That's cool.
That kind of stuff. But, I'm past the point of, I go snow skiing and I go go water skiing. I don't do that stuff anymore. My body's not built for that anymore.
Knees and backs, right?
And then, there's stuff you sacrifice. But, when you have a family and you have responsibilities, you sacrifice.
it really is a fine line, and finding that quote-unquote work-life balance for everyone is...
And I'm not that guy. Yeah. I mean, I don't have
You like the work.
I do. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a workaholic, but I struggle with that every day, is that balance. That's really what makes me most unhappy, is trying to figure out the balance between work and life. And I don't know what I would do, because so that's my personal thing. But
well, you've also got this philosophy that you want, this generation is to be better than the last, right? And you said, my job is to be better than my dad was, mm-hmm. and your girls are to be better than... Okay, Jon, so having said all that, what do you hope to have accomplished by the time you retire?
Well, to get my kids in and out of college without debt. I want to be able to just live a normal life, and that's one of the things I'm struggling with, is what does retirement look like for me? Because I'm not sure, because there's kind of a joke in my industry that refrigeration guys don't retire, we die. Because you never stop. There's always the bar on the corner, even if you retire. I mean, I know guys that are 70 years old that are still doing my trade, and they don't do it full time, but they still have their pickup truck, and they still have tools, and there's a couple bars in town that they'll still change compressor for cash here and there, and it happens. But I don't know, like the idea of me, I'd like to be sitting on a lake somewhere in Wisconsin or somewhere where I can just go fishing, where I can go back to like when I was a child and you can get your brain stop, and you can slow down without having to drink, where you can just take a breath and not feel like you have to go. I should be doing something else. I always feel like I should be in 3 places at once, it seems like.
Well, I suspect a lot of our listeners feel the same way. As leaders and even as employees, or maybe you work inside the home or don't work, there's a lot that has been reported over the last couple of years that we are inundated with so much. And especially as leaders, because, I mean, you said it, you're not only worried about your own family and your own home, you're worried about 5 more families.
That's if you're a good boss.
That's right.
Because it's not all about you. I mean, it's not. I mean, I worry about the people who work for me. I know their families. I know their, just because they have mortgage payments, they have car payments, they have kids, and their kids get in trouble like your kids or like you used to. I'm not saying specifically, I mean, what do you do when someone... Jon, I can't come in today. It's like, so-and-so, something happened. A car accident happened. So-and-so's in the hospital. I've got to be there because my son, blah, blah, blah. It happens. And you know what? You have to make decisions quickly, how to rearrange jobs, still show empathy, and still be supportive of that employee, but the business doesn't stop. I mean, one of the worst feelings I ever had was I had an employee that passed away on a Friday morning. And I couldn't believe it. He and I had worked together. I'd known him for 26 years. He and I had worked. He was my second employee ever. And we worked together for 21 years, or almost 22 years at that point. He had a heart attack on Friday morning in his home. I heard about it at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the worst part was I looked at the girls in the office, and I still had to get the schedule out, make sure that, because we had obligations to other customers. And then, of course, it sounds really stupid, but he was supposed to be somewhere. I had to jump on the schedule, and you can't call a customer and say, sorry, the guy that we were going to send to you is dead.
Right.
I mean, I know this sounds like I don't care. This happened a couple of years ago. So
no, but that's a professional.
But it is, but riding that line, because I felt like such a horrible human being after having a friend of mine and someone I'd known for so long die, and then a split second later, I'm still having to make all these professional decisions. It honestly made me feel like such a piece of crap. But at the same time, the world has to go on.
Hence the stress. I mean,
that is, and stuff like that's happened several times over the years, and I struggle with that every time. It's because on one, gosh, I don't know how else to put it. It's just a horrible feeling having to just, when you're emotionally wrecked, but at the same time.
I wonder if that is the driver behind some leaders' decisions. There are a lot of examples on social media. People are going to TikTok like crazy, and Instagram mostly, and they tell their own personal stories. And the one I remember recently is the gal whose grandmother passed, and she called in and they said, too bad, you've got to come in. We're waiting for this report. And she said, my grandmother just died. And their response was, it's not an immediate family member. Come in or you're fired. Okay, so zero empathy there.
You see, why would you work for somebody like that?
And she quit.
Good.
She just said,
her.
I'm done.
But I mean, luckily she wasn't living paycheck to paycheck and wasn't so far behind, or there was a way that she could do that.
Not everyone can immediately.
Yep. But I know how I am when stuff like that happens. I mean, that's a good one. I've had people who've had this same guy, unfortunately, 4 years before he passed away, his wife died. Woke up in the morning, she was cold in bed next to him. What do you say? He was about my age. I mean, he's like 3 years older than me. So back then he was probably 48 years old. So, I mean, they were not older people. I mean, what do you say? I didn't say, oh, you've got to go to work. I expected him back to work for a week, for 2 weeks. After a while, he used up his vacation time. My wife and I talked about it. She said, what do we do? I said, he's still a wreck. But you know how much time, and this guy gave me half of his life. I left him on the payroll. What, you don't think he's made enough money for the company over the years that I can give him a couple of free paychecks and not dock him for it? Christ, his wife just died. You've got to have empathy. And that's what I mean. And with him, it might be that. With someone else, they go through a divorce and they need to get new tires for the truck, but they don't have it because they just had to pay for an apartment. He's going through that whole train wreck in his personal life. You know what? Put the tires on the company tab. We'll deal with it later. That's what's important at that point. Everybody's different. I'm not IBM. You know what I mean? Everybody's an individual.
It's such an amazing philosophy, Jon. I am so glad that we were able to take the time with you before you went home and get you interviewed. You have amazing stories, and I wanna ask, kind of just a couple more questions. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self and tell him one or two things, what would you say?
Wow. That's a good one. The one thing I wish I had done when I was 18 years old is I wish I would have been more like I am now. That I would have put myself in other people's shoes more instead of being so self-absorbed. But that's easy to say now looking back, because when you're 18, you're supposed to be self-absorbed. The world is kind of about you at that age. You don't learn until you're older that, like they said, the world keeps on turning. If you fall off the earth tomorrow, guess what? Sun's still going to rise. Sun's still going to set. But then again, because I was so self-absorbed back then, that's probably why I pay more attention to it now and why I'm who I am now. Once again, not sad that I mean, there are people and women when I was younger that I treated poorly. And I mean, thinking about some of the stuff that I did, I mean, these aren't horrible things like go to jail stuff. Just where you were just a poor human being. And I mean, I'm embarrassed of some of those things, but also some of those things make me who I am today and why I'm so more conscious of what I do now because of the stupid stuff. And the stuff I'm kind of half embarrassed, like stories I would never tell you out loud. I don't even like to relive some of the stuff in my head. So.
We all have them, right?
I hope.
You tied in, though, a nice little arc for me, which is, yeah, when we're that age, we do think the world revolves around us. And to some degree it does, because we, at 18, 19, 20, are trying to figure out who the hell we are, what we want, and we're no longer under parental tutelage, usually. And that arc for me is that you were able to bring that into a career at just the right time, right? So, yes, there are some things that you don't, wish you hadn't have done early on, but then look at how you learned empathy and what it has done for your business and for your employees and their families. So, and I love the fact that you said a couple of times, don't regret anything. And yeah, it's hard. We all look back and we all go, what if I'd have done this instead? What if I'd have selected this, whatever it looks like. But you can't go back, and what you did and what you said, your actions, your behaviors, make you who you are today. And that is one amazing human being. Every one of us.
Also, I mean, I was fortunate enough that I didn't make any mistakes that were so bad that I couldn't recover from
Right.
them. You know, and believe me,
tried?
I've done some, you know, when I was younger, I did some questionable stuff. I mean, stuff, and also stuff where it's like, after it's all done, it's like, how did I live through that?
That's what I was just
sometimes
thinking.
Like, wow,
Yep.
whoever said there wasn't a God's wrong. You know. But,
one last kind of insightful question. If you had to write a book today for future leaders, your kids, on how to navigate their world in the next 20, 25.
Friends of mine, I worry about my wife thinks, I worry about what my children think of me. Don't live on social media. That's not the real world. The real world is when you go out and shake people's hands and talk to them.
Awesome. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about or a question you wish I would have asked today that I didn't?
No, not specifically. I didn't know what to expect today.
Well, you've been...
I don't even think my wife's as interested as this. I mean, I used to say, you know, and then I married the gal who actually likes me for me, but after 20 years, I'm not sure that's true anymore. Now we just have kids. And, you know. But yeah, my wife is a gem for putting up with me. I'm not an easy guy. So,
well,
thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, for sharing of yourself, for sharing of your business, your leadership acumen, your stories. And this will be published nationally eventually. To start, we're going to go into North Dakota and Arizona. So how can people find you online? And I heard you say you don't work with residential, so we're talking to our commercial.
Yeah, we just work the Phoenix market. So let's be clear on that. I mean, we're a small company. Phoenix is a large town, but we just work the Phoenix market. But, you know, obviously we have a phone number. Most people call in.
So you have a phone number
or
a website that you want to share?
Our website is fairrefrigeration.com, and our email address is info at fairrefrigeration.com. And there's no D in refrigeration, although everyone calls it a fridge.
Listen, spell check catches me on that every single time.
But yes, so and like I didn't do this because I'm looking for advertising. Because I mean, frankly, we've got enough work. I've got more work. I turn down work. I'm like a doctor's office. They say, no, we're not taking more patients. And like I said, I don't advertise. But the reason we're like that is because we give a crap about our customers. We take care of our employees. I may do everything I can. Like I said, reputation. Let your reputation precede you.
Well, everyone, that is why Jon and Fair Refrigeration and his employees are so successful. They understand reputation. They understand keeping your word and ethics. And I know you didn't do this for advertising. I like to make sure that whoever takes their time with me gets to put a little plug in just in case, you know, somebody out there is going, I have got to know this guy.